When I was teaching at the University of Notre Dame and directing the program for the study and practice of nonviolence, one of the sub-programs that we had was what we called the monastery program. And what it was that Notre Dame students for a summer or a semester would spend about 6 weeks or whatever it was at a Benedictine monastery, participating actually as monks at the monastery. In other words, they were not observers, they were not ancillary, they were integrated into the actual daily life that the monks lived at the monastery. The motivation for this was that in thinking about the study and practice of nonviolence, in the Catholic world, one of the primary, if not really the only serious understanding of nonviolence and its theory and practice, came out of the work of Dorothy Day in the Catholic Worker House in New York and in other places around the country. Now, that was a model, but it was only one model on how to perhaps live and think through what gospel nonviolence meant, what living as Jesus lived, loving as Jesus loved, would mean at this moment in time and space. As we thought about it, we thought that, students, when they join the Catholic worker community or any kind of community, usually have as their sole experience of community, real community, living with their families. Some have other minor experiences, short-time experiences, but most, that is the real basic experience of what living in community is. So we thought, in terms of, say, a Catholic worker model or some other model of living in a community in terms of living Jesus' teachings of nonviolent love of friends and enemies, that maybe it would be good if students experienced, as students between 18 and 22, actually living in an adult spiritual community, the ups and downs, the intricacies of it, and maybe they could bring that to building a community in whatever form they would apply Jesus' teachings of nonviolent love of friends and enemies. And so we thought this through a little bit, and we decided to ask a Benedictine community in Pine City, New York, Elmira, Mount Xavier Monastery. The head of the community there was a wonderful priest from Maria Laach in Germany, Damasus Winston, highly educated and very sane and thoughtful. And so one of our members went there and spent some time and talked to him about what we were thinking. And one of the problems was, of course, you couldn't take more students in than the community could naturally gather into their presence without altering the structure of the community and the methods of the community. So the decision was made that they could possibly take 5 at a time, 5 undergraduate students. And the decision was also made that we'd give this a pilot try, in the summer of 1970. And so we did. We announced, for example, in the Observer, the newspaper at Notre Dame, that we were going to do this, and if anyone was interested, they could come and apply and use their summer that way. Well, we did. We got 5 applications of people who thought they really wanted to do it and were willing to use up their summer in that fashion. And so the next thing we did was, we thought, well, if they're going to go into that community, and if this is going to be a model for how students could go there, and even on a semester basis, then we would have to kind of prepare them to live with each other and other people as adults. So over the winter and spring of that 1970 year, we would meet with them once a week, and we'd talk about what it meant to live with other people in community. And people came down who knew a great deal or knew something academically about living in community. Some priest from Notre Dame, Martin Kelsey, who was an Episcopalian priest and who had thought about this problem quite in depth, and others. And so we met pretty much every week for a period of time. John L. Mackenzie came down, and we just kind of firmed up relationships in terms of the 5 members who were going to go to this monastery in the summer. And so what took place was the school semester came to an end, and then in June, the 5 of them went. There was actually a 6th person who applied, but what took place was that the community could not take 6; they could only take 5. It turned out just as that student from Notre Dame went there the next year and eventually became a full-time, lifelong monk of the monastery. But that's a separate story. So in the summer of 1970, these 5 students went to Mount Xavier Monastery, and they kept the order of the monastery exactly as the monks lived it. They got up, they said the office, they went out and did the physical labor that was necessary, or whatever the case may be, whatever the order was. They ate when the monks ate, they heard the readings, and they also had courses. Now, the person who was their primary teacher there was Brother David Stendl-rast. He was a member of that community at that time. And he presented them with some wonderful, several times a week, little moments, hour of presentation on theology, spirituality, life. Highly, not only sophisticated, but realistic and powerful and meditative. And of course, they had the interaction with all the other monks who were there, and they all, for example, Martin was a doctor, medical doctor, and he eventually succeeded Damasus as the prior there, and just a wealth of experience from people who had worked at other things in life, and who nevertheless, they were able. They made their decision that this was their life at Mount Xavier Monastery, Benedictine Monastery, and indeed they came and they were full-fledged monks there. So anyway, our students went there, and they were there for the whole summer, June through August, and all of them, I can guarantee you, all of them, had a difficult experience after a few weeks, because you know how these things are, that novelty is interesting and different. And then pretty soon, after 4 weeks, working the garden and working with the livestock is not what it was in the first 4 weeks. And getting up at that time and saying the prayers in the office. See? But nevertheless, they all stayed for the whole summer term. And every one of them, to this day, to this very day, one has died for a living. Every one of them this day considered it a hallmark moment in their lives. They just learned about Christianity, about God, about Jesus, and about God and Jesus and other people and how you relate to people. They also learned how an ordered prayer life could add so much to a community life. And of course, that was the hope we had, say, that the ordered prayer life would be brought to wherever these folks were going in their future life, whatever kind of community they were in, and also enhance the deeper understanding of what it meant to not only follow Jesus' way of nonviolent love of friends and enemies, but what it meant in terms of the details of how to do that at their place and time. One of the first surprises that they faced was that when they went there, these were typical 1970 college students. The long hair, the bushy beards, everything you can imagine that you'd find at any college in the country. You know, if you went to Berkeley in California, you'd see the same thing. They were all deeply interested in gospel nonviolence, and that's one of the reasons they went. They were all deeply interested in bringing that into real life at Notre Dame and when they get out of Notre Dame. And they all wanted to be just good, faithful Christians. So one of the first things they met was, like in the Marine Corps, they no sooner got there than all these shaggy dog-looking people, the monks didn't have any hair. So out came the brother barber or whatever he was there, and he shaved off all their hair. It was, and you can see, you know, as we'll show you in a minute, or I have shown you pictures of before and after. Huh? And then they gave them a kind of garb that the novices would wear, and on they went with the life of living a Benedictine monk in a Benedictine monastery for about 10 weeks. And that was it. Now this is going to sound like it's off the subject, but it isn't. The program itself went on for at least one more year. I resigned from teaching at Notre Dame after that year of 1970. I did go up and visit them at the monastery, and we talked to all the priests and brothers there and to the students to see how things were going, if anything was really going wrong, or on either side. And it seemed like everyone was, the monks, the students, and so forth, were very content and very happy they came. And that was my last contact with the program. After that, someone took over the program of nonviolence at Notre Dame. I was gone, and that person extended the monastery program for another year, and at least one other person went into it. And then it kind of drifted away. Not by any design, just as those things happen. Interest goes this way or goes that way, and things just kind of evaporate without any actual decision. And so, as far as I was concerned, the program had ended. I was kind of sorry it ended because I thought it really had potential for doing good things for people. Now, this is the part that may not sound for a moment like it's pertinent. I was living with my wife and children in a city called Millis, Massachusetts, about, I would guess about 9 years after this. In fact, I'm sure it was about 9 years after this. And there was a Dominican group of sisters there, and they lived kind of in the country, but what they did was something very, very nice. They brought in women who were about to be released from prison, and they had them live with them, not as Dominican sisters, but just live with them, to kind of be kind of an incubator, to just move along before coming from the prison life to the everyday life can be awfully difficult. It was a great ministry, good things done. I did not know them myself. I don't even remember a name of them. I never even remember meeting them. But my wife was involved with them, and she really liked them, and she visited them and so forth and so on. And some of my children did too, but I did not know them. And one day my wife, Mary, got a call from the superior there, and she said that they had a visitor from France who was a Benedictine nun, and she had been with them for a few days, but she had to get back to Boston College that day in order to catch a plane to France the next day. And would Mary drive her in? Because they couldn't do it at the time. So Mary said, well, she couldn't, but she'd ask me. So they asked me, and I said, fine. And so they dropped this nun off at our little house in Millis, and we get in a Volkswagen van, and the two of us rode up to Boston College, which is about 45-minute ride. So as we were driving up, I asked her what she was doing here in the United States. And she said, well, she was superior general or something like that of a certain section of Benedictines in France, and she was coming over here just to look at several ways of ministry that nine sisters had worked out, who were in convents and so forth and so on, or monasteries. And so she was here looking at this Dominican project that was going on, and she was very pleased with it and very happy with it, and we got to talking and so forth, and I asked her how she got into thinking with all these things, and she said, it's kind of interesting. She said, I was just a local superior. I'm probably not using the right words, but I was just a local superior in a Benedictine women's monastery in France. And in 1970, all the superiors, Benedictine monasteries, met in Rome in the fall of 1970. And I was there, and she said, this man who'd just been elected the new abbot of a monastery in the United States, Mount Xavier Monastery, came and gave a plenary talk to the whole group about a program they had started, which was that they had students coming in and living as monks, and it started the previous summer, and how wonderful it was, not only for the students but for the monks themselves. It was just life-giving, and it introduced a little spontaneity into the community, and it was just every way, shape, or form. It worked out perfectly, and they couldn't be more happy with it. That was Martin. Martin was the prior elected at Mount Xavier that fall after Damasus Winston retired because he was old. And so he gave the talk, and the sister I'm with, I don't even remember her name, she came, she said she went back to her her monastery, and she told the sisters about it and talked about it, and that they thought about it, and finally they thought they'd try it, but it wouldn't be with college students. It would just be with any young woman, whether they were college students or not, who wanted to come and, say, spend a few months with them just as real Benedictine nuns. And so they started it, and she said the program really grew nicely, not in their convent, they could only handle so many, but in other monasteries, little women Benedictine monasteries in France and a few other places. And she said that's how I started. Well, I do know from a newspaper article I read back in 1971 that Martin did go over there and he gave this talk just on that, not on anything else, just on that. That's why he was invited over there. So she started this same program back in France that really spread nicely. I don't know what happened to it, but now she was over here in America looking at other programs where the monasteries could, without changing their rules, without overloading themselves, with just being what they were, invite people into a different kind of experience of Christianity, of community, of God, that hopefully would bring them out to be something better than they were when they came in. Now, part of the plan of what we had set up was that if you live 10 weeks or you live a semester in a monastery as a student, and you meet all those people and you interact with them and integrate with them as not just priests and monks, but as real people, you always have a spiritual home to come back to, or at least a spiritual residence. And for over a lifetime, if you could go back, and it would be like coming home. And it's a retreat. It's a place for retreat that you'd always have. That was not just a ordinary retreat house. And that happened. That happened for a little while after, and then it kind of faded away, probably because the program had ceased, and it wasn't going on anymore at Mount Xavier. But the sister told me that they really have. They had a lot of people who would come back. These are women now, after they'd been there, and they'd come back, and not necessarily because they were in trouble or anything like that, but just it was a place to go that was different, and that would give them some kind of energy to go out and to live their Christian life in the world they were in. So I was kind of shocked at that, of course, because here I am 9 years later. The program that I started at Notre Dame had ended, gone, it was ended, it did what it was supposed to do, and that was fine with me. And then this comes along in 1979, and that's kind of it seemed like God was giving me a little touch saying, you did your job, and this is good, and now don't worry about it. Things will go on forward as I want them to go on forward. The fact that it didn't continue at Notre Dame is not that important, and it is continuing. And the strange event of one day a sister from France needing a drive to Boston College to get a plane, it was a touch. It was a touch from God saying, that was good. Good thing you did. Nice thing. Well, then it turned out that years later, Mount Xavier itself started the program with another university college, St. Francis College, I think it was. And they had the program going on just as we set it up. And it turns out that, unbeknownst to me at the time, my son heard about it and went there, Charlie. And he was there for I don't know, a semester or summer or something, and had a marvelous experience and made marvelous friends and so forth and so on. And I know that to this day, the monastery still carries on the program with that other college, whatever it is. So I guess I have to say that, you know, people in their spiritual lives, our thought was, at that time, and still is with me today, you go in any religious bookstore, any religious article store, so forth and so on, any Christian or Catholic university, and you'll find stacks and stacks and shelves of books on spirituality and how to pray and how to be a good person and how to follow Jesus, and all that's fine. But our thought was, you don't have to invent fire all over again every year, every person. A lot has been learned by a lot of people over the millennia. And it has been preserved. A lot of it has been preserved. And that the Benedictine rule, with all the things that go with it, all the learning over the centuries of adaptations and whatever the case may be, in a serious Benedictine monastery, a human being could go there and maybe learn something about God, how to pray, how to approach life, how to live nonviolently, peace, how to live at peace with himself and people in a way that you would never get from books. Let me give you an analogy. It's as if, you know, and really, you got to have a certain amount of willingness to accept the disbelief in this. But it's as if a person, you know, had been born and brought up, and they never came in contact with water, except the Plymouth. They never came in contact with water. Now, they had read about water. They read poetry about water. They had seen pictures of water in the book. They knew the chemistry of water. Maybe they even had a PhD in water. But they never come in contact with water. And then one day someone says, come on with me down. And they step just one step in the lake. Water. And then they go in a little further and spread out water. And then they float in it, water. You see, they learned something by contact with the reality that they just would not get out of the books. It's not that the books were wrong, the chemistry was right, but this is different. It is, instead of abstract knowledge in a book, it's concrete knowledge through experience. It's not a better knowledge or a worse knowledge, but it is a different kind of knowledge. And that was our hope with the college students going to Mount Xavier Monastery, that they would come in contact with basically 1,500 years of spiritual life in a particular tradition that a serious group of men were living, or in this case from France, women, and that they would experience life. They would experience life in a way that was different from books. They'd experience faith in a way that was different from books. They'd experience love in a way that was different from books. Community different from books. Prayer different from books. And God different from books. Because remember, St. Benedict, in the beginning, all he required way back and Monte Cassino, all that he required was for people to come to the monastery is, are you searching for God? And if you're searching for God, come. He didn't change the way of life that the monastery lived. He didn't do any of that. It's just come and live in this atmosphere. Live in this water and see what comes of it. And so the program, I believe, still goes on at Mount Xavier Monastery in Pine City, New York. All the people, most of the people who were there as monks way back in the 70s, they have all gone their way. You know, they pass like the trucks are passing here now, and I have no contact with any of them, but it still seems to me that this is a proper, right, and available way of people experiencing Jesus, of learning about the Christian commitment, Christian life, Christian community. And that, you know, we have Catholic Church, and I'm sure Anglican churches and Protestant churches too. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of monasteries all over the world with good men and women committing their lives to searching for God through prayer and community love. And I still do believe this day, which is a lot of years later, 2022, that it's a good idea that universities or other churches, parishes, dioceses make available that kind of experience, not just with the Benedictines, but with others, but make available that kind of experience to young people, you know, that they couldn't get anyplace else, but that is as much the knowledge, is as much truth of Catholicism, of Christianity, as they could get from any book. It's not better, it's not worse, but it is the truth, and it's experiential truth of this is where and how to reach God, possibly reach God, search for God, and to always have a place to come back to as they move into and through their adult life with all its warps and woofs. So that was 1970, and this is 2022. And Benedictine monasteries are still there, the sisters as well as the priests. So if it sounds like a good idea to you, go contact one. Because as Brother David Stendl-rast, who taught the students at Notre Dame, and who now is a world-renowned spiritual director, he's in his 90s, I believe. As Brother David said, serious nonviolence in the model of Jesus requires seriously living in the life of Jesus and seriously praying to Jesus for the power to live it. But, this is what he said, the monastic vocation ultimately is a vocation of nonviolence because it brings you to that and that understanding of God alone. God is a God of love. God is a God without violence in him, without enmity, and a God of peace.
We